beliefs about the nation of Israel, the modern nation state of Israel, always come to the forefront when these things happen. The beliefs that the Jews are God's chosen people, that they have divine rights to the land, and that we must support them politically, very prominent views among Christians. And that falls under what's typically called the dispensational belief system, which most evangelicals pretty much hold to. It's kind of the default for your Bible church, Baptist, charismatic type Christians. Most of you know that St. David's takes a different approach to eschatology. We believe in partial preterism, which means a lot of prophecies in the New Testament were for the first century. They are in our past, not in our future. They've already been fulfilled. We also have a different view on the Jewish people today and the modern state of Israel. So I thought this would be a good time to review our beliefs on this, and I hope it will help you think about these things from a biblical perspective. Also, I'm sure most of you know, I was raised as a missionary kid in Israel and Palestine. And so I care deeply about this topic. I care about the Jewish people, and I care about the Palestinian people. And my family has dear friends on all sides of this conflict. Okay? So maybe my experience can help shed some light for you. First, I want to dispel a popular myth that we frequently hear, and you may have even heard it here in the last week, which is that Palestine has attacked Israel. That Israel is at war with the Palestinians. Or that the Palestinians want to kill the Jews. Framing the conflict as Jews versus Palestinians is very misleading. It is not an accurate portrayal of what's happening on the ground. What we call Palestine today is actually made up of two separate territories. Does anybody know what those are?
West Bank.
Bingo. Gaza and the West Bank. Very good. Two separate territories, Gaza and the West Bank. The West Bank is the larger of the two. Cities like Bethlehem and Jericho are in the West Bank. That's where I lived growing up. The West Bank has its own government structure that Israel agreed to back in the early 90s. Under Yasser Arafat, they made peace. They created the West Bank to give them some of their own independence. Okay? The Gaza Strip, however, is totally separate from the West Bank. Cities in Gaza are run by Hamas, which is the terrorist organization that has attacked Israel this past week. Okay? I actually have a little map here. You might not all be able to see it. But you'll see from the map that these areas aren't even connected. Okay? So here's the darker part here is Israel. Over here on this side, you've got the West Bank, this big portion. And then way over here, you've got this smaller portion. And that's a small country, okay? So it's not like you can't travel. But my point is it's not like they're even neighbors, okay? The territories of Israel actually divide, okay? And so it's important to just understand the geography, to understand what's actually going on politically, all right? The Gaza Strip and West Bank are both predominantly Muslim, and both are considered Palestinian. But what needs to be understood is that Palestinian doesn't denote a political entity. All right? It's a reference to geography. It's a location. That's it. When you say Palestine, you're talking about an area and a region. You're not talking about political affiliation. All right? Before the establishment of the Jewish state in 1948, all of it was just called Palestine. All of it was called Palestine. But when Israel was established and came in, well, they changed the name for their territories to Israel, and whatever's left over is still Palestine. That's how we've ended up with that usage So are they both Palestinians? Well, sure. But are they the same government? No. Are they the same? Do they have the same, principles and such? Not necessarily. Okay? So it would be more accurate to say that Israel is at war with Gaza or with Hamas, more specifically, not the Palestinians in general. Yes, they are Palestinian, but they don't represent the majority of Palestinians. They are the minority. They truly are. Remember, the West Bank is the majority of Palestinians. Okay? The majority of Palestinians are in the West Bank. They're not attacking Israel. The West Bank government doesn't even think Hamas is a legitimate government. They have their own conflicts with each other. And yet, they're lumped in with the terrorists when we make these generalizations. And that can be very harmful, and that can be very hurtful to innocent people who have nothing to do with what's going on. Okay? Some other facts, just for your awareness. 46,000 Christian Palestinians are in the West Bank. That's from a statistic as of 2017, so it's a little older, but that's the estimate we have. A newer statistic from just last year is that there are 1,100 Christian Palestinians in Gaza. So if you put that together, in all of the Palestinian territories, you've got 47,000 Christians. And that's going to be predominantly Eastern Orthodox or Catholic, but there are also Protestants, evangelicals, and so forth. Okay? So 47,000 Christian Palestinians. Compare that to less than 16,000 Messianic Jews in Israel, in the Israeli territories. Okay? A Messianic Jew is what we call a native, Jewish person who has accepted Jesus, who has become a Christian. And I only point that out just for you to have something to compare it to. That Palestinian Christians greatly outnumber Israeli Christians. And yet, most evangelicals in America write off the Palestinians in favor of the Israelis. And the Israeli government is by no means righteous or holy. They are a secular state. Tel Aviv is known as the lawful capital of the world. Okay? Very wicked stuff going on. Okay? So just something to think about as you hear people, because there's propaganda on all sides. And so as you hear stuff that favors one side over another, just remember, all right, there's a balance that we need to try to hold on to. Okay, well, let's think biblically about these issues. First of all, are modern Jews God's chosen people? We do not deny that God chose Abraham and his descendants for special purposes and a special covenant to reveal himself and to reveal the Messiah, Jesus. We do not deny that God gave promises to Abraham, including land promises. Don't deny that. Okay? But we do not believe that modern Jews, as they are known and identified, are God's chosen people. That's not a status that they have maintained. We believe that things changed in the new covenant because of Christ's work. And I dare say that Galatians 3 is the only chapter you need to see this clearly. We're going to read some things from Galatians 3 if you would like to turn there yourself. Paul makes it so simple for us. And if you're talking to someone about these things and you feel like, I need a passage or I need proof, right? Just remember, Galatians 3. Galatians 3. The first verse to notice is verse 7. Listen to what Paul says. Therefore know that only those who are of faith are sons of Abraham. Paul was exhorting the Galatians to not fall for Jewish heresies, to not start following the law after they have already accepted Christ, right? To not follow the Old Covenant ceremonies. And one of his points is that the true sons of Abraham are those who have faith in the Messiah. Listen again. Therefore know that only those who are of faith are sons of Abraham. He fills this out down in verse 16, where he says, now to Abraham and his seed were the promises made. He does not say, and to your seeds in the plural, but in the singular, and to your seed. And Paul says, who is Christ. The seed is Christ. Paul's referencing Genesis 12. This is when God gave the promises to Abraham. I will make you a great nation. In you, all the earth shall be blessed. And to your seed, I will give this land. All right? Paul says that Jesus is the seed of Abraham, not the Jewish people in general throughout history. The seed is Jesus. He was the final end. He was the ultimate descendant and son of Abraham. Okay, and then finally, verse 29. If you are Christ's, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. How are you Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise? If you are Christ's. Not if you have Jewish ancestry. If you are Christ's. Okay? So Jesus is the seed, but those of faith are united to Jesus. We're his body. And so that makes us the seed of Abraham by extension. You can only be the seed of Abraham through faith in Christ. The Jewish people, by and large, from the first century to the modern day, have rejected Jesus as the Messiah. They do not have faith in him. So, comparing them to Galatians 3, what would we conclude? The Jews that have not received Christ as Lord, they are not sons of Abraham. They are not Abraham's seed. They are not heirs according to the promise. But who is? Jesus. And everyone in him. Lineage and bloodline mean nothing anymore in the New Covenant. This is something that people still get hung up on. And it makes no difference. What does Paul say 2 different times in the New Testament? 1 Timothy 1 and then Titus 3. Avoid endless genealogies which cause disputes. We're done with that. Okay? So, now, and you know, I've taught on this before, but technically the categories of Jew and Gentile aren't even applicable anymore in the New World. Okay? After AD 70, those distinctions don't really make any sense. The Jewish faith was never just about bloodline, it was also about the religion. And that was destroyed when the temple was destroyed. What we have now as modern Judaism is just a corruption, perversion, counterfeit of what they used to have. It's not the same at all when you look at it. Okay? That world and its covenants are over and done. We are in the new world with a new covenant. And so we're either Christians or non-Christians. There's also, this is also from Galatians 3, verse 28. He says, in Christ there is no Jew nor Greek. What does that mean? That means that we are not to think of people in those categories anymore as dividing lines, right? Or distinctions of God's special favor. We're not allowed to think like that anymore. And so that's another reason why the Jew-Gentile distinction has faded away. I think these passages in Galatians 3 are abundantly clear, regardless of whatever else you might believe about eschatology or about other passages. Okay? Whatever else you believe, it cannot contradict these words. There's no other way around it. And I'm not exactly sure how dispensationalists get around all of these things, but a big part of it is their rejection of preterism. Their rejection of preterism, right? If you think that everything in the New Testament is still in our future, that has not yet been fulfilled, well, what are you going to find? You're going to find that it still has a lot to do with Israel and the Jews and the temple is in contradiction to what the apostles are teaching in the whole ministry of Christ. And so you need to see things from a different perspective, right? And help them see that a lot of those things were for the first century. If you accept partial preterism, you see that those things have faded away. And it's much easier to accept this perspective. Another verse that's really good is 1 Peter 2:9. Peter says that the church is the royal priesthood, the holy nation, God's own special people. How much clearer could it be? He says that about the church, not about, bloodline Jews or things like that. Okay? Bloodline Jews can be in the church, absolutely, but not as they're not his people in a distinct fashion. Okay? So the descendants of Jews today call themselves Jews. They name their country Israel, but that doesn't mean that they are or represent the Jews or Israel of the Bible. Okay? And we need to remember that and keep that distinction clear. My position is that they are to be viewed as any other country. They don't have special privileges in God's eyes. Their wars and conflicts are not related to true biblical prophecy or end times. Do they have the right to exist as a nation? Well, sure, absolutely. Do they have the right to defend themselves from attackers? Absolutely. And they desperately need the gospel. Okay? But they are not God's chosen people and have no claim anymore on God's promises, including the land promises. Which, when you understand that, then it makes things a little complicated when you learn the history and how Israel came to be in 1948. And you might start to understand, not that it's right, I'm not defending it, but then you might start to understand why the Palestinians feel like Israel is an invader and an occupier. Okay? But I'll answer questions on that if you have. Here's what I want to pose to you at the end here. Does this position that I just outlined mean that God's promises to Abraham have been nullified? Does it mean that the church replaced Israel and that everything about Israel was revoked? That's how dispensationalists will criticize argument. Okay? That's replacement theology. You're just cutting off the Jewish people and stuff like that. But that's not what this position means. Because what ethnicity is Jesus? A Jew. A Hebrew. We sometimes forget the Jewishness of Jesus, but we shouldn't do that. Okay? Let me remind you, Jesus is a Jew. He has an immortal Jewish body in heaven. The Jewishness of Jesus is what makes him the seed of Abraham. Does anybody have that bumper sticker? My master is a Jewish carpenter or something like that. You ever seen that? Remember, he's a Jew. All right, he's a Jew. We need to remember that. And so, what does that mean for all the promises? The promises to Abraham, including the land promises, now go to Jesus. He is the one who will inherit the land and the whole world, because he is the true seed of Abraham. Okay? By the way, I'm following Pastor Jeff Myers on this. He has a great article called "Forever Means Forever: God's Promises to the Jews." And he's trying to deal with this sort of thing, right? Does our position on this mean that we're saying, oh, God didn't keep those promises to Abraham? No, not at all. You got to remember that Jesus is a Jew. Jeff Myers says Jesus is the last faithful Jew, and therefore the inheritor of all the promises. And so this means that there's no need to spiritualize the promises. There's no need to make them symbolic or something like that. Okay? No. We believe they are yes and amen in Jesus. Jesus is a physical Jew, a literal descendant of Abraham. We believe that he is literally taking dominion over the earth, and his dominion will literally be accomplished. And we expect that in literal human history. So there's no spiritualizing, writing things off. That's typically what the accusation is. All right? Some people call our view replacement theology, that the church has replaced Israel. I think it would be better to call it fulfillment theology. Or maybe remnant theology. Remnant theology might be better, because the church is the fulfillment of Israel. The church is the remnant of the faithful Jews and faithful Gentiles who now have a new identity in one body. Not as Jew or Gentile, but as Christians. So that is what we need to focus on, and that is where our heart, when we see these things happening, yes, we lament the fact, we lament that this is happening, but it's no different than when you see things going on in other countries, in other wars. We might feel somewhat sentimental towards that area, just because it is where our Lord was, it is where the things that we read about is privileged. And that's fine, but you need to not let that go too far, and where you get the bad theology, right? There's nothing inherently special about the dirt over there, okay? That's done, right? Calling it the Holy Land is kind of a misnomer. I already told you it's not that holy, okay? It's pretty bad. But if we're going to talk in those terms, the whole earth is now holy. Jesus has claimed it all, and he's the Lord over it all, okay? And so these are things that you're going to hear from other Christians. Be gracious and be kind, but I hope this is helpful to you to understand how to talk about it and what you should believe yourself biblically. Let me just say also, I mentioned we do believe that Israel has the right to defend itself from attackers, as we would say for any nation. And so we can fully support, when Hamas is the aggressor and initiates an attack, we can certainly support Israel going after them. I will say, however, that just like with any war, any defensive strategy, the Bible actually gives us warfare policies, okay, in Deuteronomy, that I believe we should still be following. And so just like we might say our own nation commits war crimes when they go and indiscriminately bomb maybe, men, women, children who had nothing to do with the attacks, nothing to do with the politics and the government structure. Right? So no, we need to avoid that as much as possible. And I will tell you, Israel, this is not necessarily a secret or anything, but Israel, when these things happen, some people call it collective punishment, is what they do. They lock down the West Bank. The West Bank right now doesn't have food coming in. They can't travel for work to different areas of Israel because Israel locks down it all. Even though it was coming from Gaza, the people in the West Bank are now suffering as well. Okay, and so that's something we need to think about. Yes, we support a nation's right to defend itself, but shouldn't they also take precautions to not harm innocents, to not harm civilians, to not be, extreme in their retaliation? You go after the ones who did it as best as possible. Right? You go after the head. You don't retaliate with hurting more innocent people. That's just returning evil for evil. Right? If someone comes and kills your child, do you go and kill his child? No. You kill him. Right? He's the aggressor. He's the one who should be punished. Right? So, any questions or thoughts on any of this? I know it's a big topic, but we've got some time. Goody?